Hey guys, my name is TEHJ, and this is a deconstruction of my newest single, Project Crunk. Alright, so the first thing that I started with, and my mindset in this was to be able to, I'm a 90s kid, so I wanted to have, a throwback song and take a sample from it. The sample that I have here is, the 2000s track.
Let's get it. Let's get it from the. Let's get it.
So that's the first thing that I started with, and kudos to you if you know exactly what song I'm talking about. After that, I went right into trying to figure out, what claps I'm going to use. The claps that I use are more high pitched, and I layered it with the tambourine, so it sounds like this. Moving forward, I wanted to have a bigger tribal snare. So after that, I went right into having these. So I layered this snare with a tom and a snare together. It's really important. One of the biggest things that, was a challenge and is a challenge when you're working on these songs is, figuring out where each song is supposed to be placed in the frequency spectrum, right? So you have to be careful. It's really important to know what should be stereo, what should be mono. In this case, the snare tom mix was a mono. So when I'm working on a track, I move back and forth from the drop to the beginning, back to the drop. The main thing here was working on the kick. Having a good pattern for the kick was, that's what drives you, right? You have your sub and your kick. That's literally getting that low end for you. So this is the kick pattern that I use. Shout out to Player 2, man. He's the homie. He gave me a sample pack for his kicks, and man, they thump. So this is a pattern that I use for the kicks. You got to keep it moving, and then I added a sub in there right underneath it, making sure that side chaining your sub with your kick is very important. Like I said in the beginning, having that that area where the kick and the snare and the sub are not conflicting each other, just because they can be, especially because they lie in the area from the 200 hertz lower than the 200 hertz. After that, I mainly went right into the drop, which is what I was working on. So in this drop, I have my main synth, which sounds like this. I processed it a little bit. I don't like to add too many reverberants or echoes and things like that to it. You want to keep it as flat as possible. Not flat necessarily, but to keep it, you don't want to process it too much because it starts to get really muddy during those times. You want to be able to go into, so for this specific one, I use Serum. You want to be able to go right into Serum and, make those changes. So after that, kind of add your processing however you like, but just make sure you're not, dipping into, too much of like processing, because it could get really muddy during those times. So after I layered that with a higher synth, which sounds like this. So together, it's very low. You can faintly, it's a very faint sound. And then I added a lower pitched synth. So that sounds like this. Later, I added another synth on there on the lower portion. So in that region, it focuses mainly on the 500 hertz and up. I added a lower end on top of the sub. So the sub is chilling around, the 500 hertz and lower. After I'm just literally building a block. You're putting together a puzzle is how I like to think about it. So I added another synth, and that sounds like this. And together, it sounds like this. As the song progressed, you want to keep it moving at all times, right? You want to add another element after either 8 bars or 16 bars. You want to keep it moving, right? Something to keep it, flowing and to keep it exciting for the crowd. I added these hi-hats, which sound like this. So from there, it was literally together. Just had it going. So the next portion of this song is where the hip hop breakdown is, and that was really exciting for me because for me it was more of like a real breakdown, but kind of where you get you're like juking on and kind of moving, like all right. So you'll know exactly what I mean right when we get to that portion. So the first thing I started with was I added a brand new kick. I added another sub underneath it, a brand new sub. So a new sub, new kick, and that sounds like this. Underneath that, I added a string, so just to kind of like keep it moving together. So the vocals are still going through this the entire time because the vocals, even though that they're short and they're very simple, it's only like a 3-second loop. I wanted to have it play out throughout the entire song and on very specific areas, right? So I added those snares back in there just to keep it moving. So during this time right here, I brought in a brand new snare. So that's about 2 snares, right? And then I added a third one later on coming in as a transitional snare. So this snare was more based on, just like the grooviness that I was talking about, that like juking kind of vibe to it. So during that part right there, I added a brand new snare. It's a hip hop snare with the original tribal snare that I had in the beginning of the track, and then I also added a brand new kick to it. This was actually taken by a Lex Luger sample. Shout out to him, man. He's a legend in the game, and so I had to use one of his samples. Moving forward, I went right into the original build-up again. That's right here. The build-up is very simple. I used a Homeboys. That's a plugin that I use for my echoes and delays. This one, echoes is really crazy because it has its like presets where they start getting like really crazy and like it just starts. It has its own way of build-ups. So I used that in this as a build-up. I used it right here for the vocal build-up, which sounds like this. So that pretty much kind of adds its own like vocal essence on top of the white noise that you'll hear. Sounds like this. And it goes right back into the hi-hats. I wanted to keep it exciting, right? So I already showed you guys exactly what was happening during the first part without the hi-hats, and then this goes right back into the excitement, so it just keeps you moving. So the next thing I want to jump into is the breakdown. The main thing that I focused on here was, I added a sweep down, and from there, I had the vocals pretty much going the whole time. I cut up the vocals in different ways, right? So in this portion, I did add a new hip hop kick, and a hip hop snare to it with some hi-hats. Again, it's really, you want to be intricate with your vocals. Like I did have the vocals go throughout the entire track, and like it's a 3-second sample, but I mixed it up. I high-pitched some of them. So here you go. After I did that breakdown, I went right into the original build-up, going into the second drop pretty much. The newest thing that I added for the second drop was I added the vocal samples in there. And I'll show you exactly what that sounds like. The biggest thing I want to give away, as a tip is to stay organized as much as you can, especially within your DAW, your samples, your different areas should always be organized so you know exactly what you're looking for when you're making, when you need to change something up. Alright guys, that wraps it up for my newest single, Project Crunk. I hope you guys enjoyed the deconstruction of it. I'm really excited to show this to you guys, and man, party on with it. Alright guys, my name is Dip. Fuck. Alright guys, so that wraps it up for my deconstruction for this track. Alright, wait, hold on. What song was I working on again?